we're officially recording as of now. So if we were to boil down all of permaculture's principles to one principle, that would be to repair broken, the pollution and problems caused from broken loops by building connection to community and to nature. So when we do element analysis, that's really what we're looking at doing. We're looking at the outputs of an element and its waste streams. And we're trying to capture all of the nutrients and everything, all of the energies that would be lost to the system and direct them back into the system. So we're going to try to play, we're going to play a game. We're going to start tonight with a bit of a game. Let's see if I can share. We'll use the whiteboard here for a second. And we can write these down. You can feel free to write some of these down. What we're going to do is write down a list of a few elements, and we can add some more to this. So I'm going to start with compost. Compost. What are some more, and please speak up or use the chat, what are some more elements that you have on your lists of elements for your projects? Yeah, we'll do, instead of water, we'll make it a slightly more specific element or pattern and call it a rain barrel for now. Rain barrel. Swales or terraces, but I'm just going to write swales. Somebody is going to want chickens. Classic permaculture example. Rain garden. Maybe two more. Oh, good one. One more. How about the classic? Where would we be in a permaculture class without an herb spiral? Absolutely, that's great. So here we go. Here are elements. Make sure you, let's see if I can cut and paste those for later. Okay, so these are our elements. If you got them, try to have them written down here. You have them written down? Take a second to write these down. We're gonna take 5 minutes to play before we play the game, to prep. So compost, vegetable beds, rain barrel, swales, chickens, rain garden, fruit tree guild, and herb spiral. Those are our elements here. Okay, so while you finish writing these down, what we are going to do is I would like you to think of as many, you can think of any other elements that aren't on our list. Any other elements that aren't on our list too, you know, anything you can think of. I would like you, for each one of these elements, to Oculus, you could put that on there. For each one of these elements, I would like you to list as many other beneficial interactions, any other things you could connect these to that you can. So we'll use the first one in a second as an example. So what I would like you to do is think of any other systems or patterns or elements in the landscape or your farm that you could connect compost to. We're going to do this one. Hopefully you have these written down. So I have them copied. I'm going to stop sharing for now. I'm going to get rid of the whiteboard for a second. Okay, so so take a minute right now, and write down as many interactions, as many other elements as you could link to the compost system. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. See if who can write really fast. If you want to, we're going to do this with all of them. So if you already understand, you can get a head start and start listing other elements for the other ones on our list. Jason just came on late. I'm going to send you a list via chat. I send it to everyone. This is a list of elements, and what we're doing is a game. We're going to try to think of as many other elements as we can connect to these elements and see who can come up with the longest list. Now we're going to check in on compost. Yeah, we're going to check in on compost. We're going to do compost as an example. How many elements, you can show me by fingers, how many elements do you have for compost, connected to compost? I see 5 from Pamela, 5 from Tala, 5 from Christy, 6 from Dennis, 6 from Joey. Anybody beat 6? Okay, we'll start with Joey, since Dennis has an internet lag. Joey, what elements did you get for compost?
I had everything but the rain barrels, but now that I think about it, you could just use the rain barrels, the overflow, to hit the compost, to water your compost. So that's all.
So you used all of the elements on our list can connect to the compost. You could also, just to make an illustration of the way the game works, you can use things that aren't on the list too. So if you wanted to, you could add other things to this. So okay, same as with Joey. So can anyone think of any other elements that we could connect to compost? So we have them all on our list. By the way, Joey, before a worm farm, yeah, absolutely. Worm farm, your neighbor's food scraps. You could get all the food scraps from your block. That's right. You could have, you could get your neighborhood daycare could go around to all of the houses in your neighborhood collecting the food scraps by bike, bring them back to your compost pile. So it could connect daycare. All right. So remember, it does it a bokashi system. Yeah. Okay. Exactly. So just to be as creative as we can, we don't have to stick to my list of elements. You can go beyond my list of elements. Before we move on, Joey, could I get you back for a second? You want to talk about how those elements interact real quick?
Sure. Okay, so actually, I'll just go down the, you could do mulching, composting in place for your fruit tree guild. Your herb spiral could have, up at the top, you could have compost feeding the whole herb spiral. You could do compost in place for your vegetable beds. You could use the rain barrel to its overflow to water your compost. The chickens, you could have a compost system set up in like a chicken tractor, and then your swales could be basically harvesting compost for you since they're a ditch, and then that's all of them.
Okay, good. By the way, have you heard of trench composting, everyone? Trench composting is one of the very best composting systems you can do. And it's basically what Joey just said. You have a swale, you can dig a swale. These can be uphill of your garden bed. And then over time, you can actually bury your compost or put wood chips over it. It's such a cool system. And we do it at Lily House. I've actually done it in a couple gardens. So real quick, I want to show you how that works. It's a good one to show. So if I have a slight hill and I dig a swale like that, so remember, this would be the normal shape, and I take the soil out of here and move it to there so that it catches and soaks water. Then this area here, if my trench is deep enough, I can actually make a small, if this is long, this is maybe 20 feet long as a garden bed or 10 feet long as a garden bed. I can fill this with some compost, cover it over with a layer of wood chips. Now I have a path that is also a fertility building path. When the water comes down, it actually helps the water soak in. And now I can fertigate my crops because I have fertilizer rich water to water my new garden bed. If I want, I can put a nurse log here so I can hold this in place well, and I have something that has a path on one side and a nurse log on the other side. I have something that's basically a raised bed with its own fertility system. So pretty cool kind of interaction there. And one more while I'm at this. If you don't have a slope, in one of my recent drawings, I showed something that said mulch basin. You can do the same thing, and only you do it in this is the world's worst keyhole bed, like this, right? So this is here in the middle of a garden bed. This here in the middle can be the same thing. I dig out an area, I fill this with compost material, cover that over with wood chips. Now I have my path for my keyhole garden bed, right? And it's a fertility system. Now I link that to the rain barrel on my house, and this comes here and it waters that whole garden too. So there's a nice interaction, that mulch basin in a keyhole bed networked up to my rain barrels. That's a great system we can use on perfectly flat land. People always ask me, how do we do things like swales to capture and direct water on flat lands? Well, here's one idea. I just put that in a recent post, so I thought I'd take a second to explain it. All right, so we did compost. What was next on our list? Of course, I didn't write it down. Someone please tell me.
Vegetable beds.
Vegetable beds. All right, you got, who has, have you already tried it? Have you started? I'll give you a minute. Make connections with vegetable beds. How many things can you network with your vegetable beds? Okay, well, I'm going to make you think quick tonight. We'll see how many do you have? Does anybody have 5? Joey has 5, 6. Tala has 6, 5, 5. Anybody have 6? You have 5, or Jason, or 6? Oh, okay. Anybody have more than 8? I'll say, Jason, you got this one. Go for it. Let's hear about your connections for a vegetable bed.
All right, so pardon me. Things I can connect to a vegetable bed are kids very easily because the kids graze there. Habitat, we've had bunnies nesting in our veggie beds before, in addition to all kinds of other creatures. Compost, that's a fairly straightforward connection. Chickens can be used to eat weeds out of a veggie bed or to prep the ground. Fruit trees can provide temperature stability and a sun trap effect. Herbs can be used as edges to keep grass out. Shrubs can be used as part of a sun trap effect and for mulch, and native plants can be used for mulch generation, habitat, insectary plants, all kinds of stuff.
Cool. Awesome. I like that one. What was next on our list? I guess I can check the chat. I sent it to Jason here. The next one was rain barrel. Rain barrels. Yeah. So take a second on rain barrels. I'm going to give you just a minute on rain barrels. We'll probably do all of the rest of them pretty quick, so you feel free to work ahead while we're talking. It's a fun thing to do. It's a good way to use class time. I think one of the most valuable things we can do in like a PDC is to model this kind of thinking with each other. So, okay, rain barrels, how many you got? Make you think quick. 6 for Joey, 6 for Stishin. Anybody have more than 6 for rain barrels? Infinity. Okay, bet you gotta listen. We're gonna be here a long time tonight. All right. Does somebody else have how many you got? Anybody have like 6 or 7? Well, Dennis, you're on the spot. You said infinity, so let's see if you can get more than 6.
Okay, that's good. I guess I deserve this one for sure. Well, one thing I've learned about permaculture is capturing water is pretty important, and it may be the one thing that is common with design. I'm assuming for any type of climate or any type of site, for that matter, is water management. And when I look at the rain barrels I have set up here, and I was trying to list, I can use them for numerous things. And that's why I put infinity as kind of a joke, but water is so important. I can run the hoses down to, I've got one that's running down to a little pond. I got another one that's running down to, I got 2 more that are running down to rain gardens. Another one that goes to a recession area. One of them feeds a banana circle. You could also run a hose from a rain barrel to feed, say, a pig trough to water animals. You could use it to fill an area that's dammed. To water a fruit tree guild, you can if there's enough elevation difference, you can use it to run to the top of the herb spiral and a soaker hose, something like that. Is that close to infinity? It's closer than I was when I started, right?
That's pretty good. That's good enough for tonight. Concerns about the water quality from rain barrels. I'll give you my opinion and see if anyone else has thoughts about that. I use food grade rain barrels. My feeling is, they have a fairly high surface area compared to, say, a plastic glass that I might drink from, or low surface area contact with the water. So I kind of feel like if we're drinking out of plastic and eating out of plastic, I tend to run all of my rain barrel water into swales or mulch basins so that the microbes in the mulch basin, which I'm composting in, will help break that down a little bit. It gets thought, yeah. Oh, and what comes off the roof too. I heard Jeff Lawton talk about that. And he said, basically, if you're comfortable breathing the air in your city, then the material that comes off the roof, to the extent that it's there. But we can make, when we get into the water class, we'll talk about a couple of different kind of diverter systems we can make. So there's like Teresa, there's something called like a ball diverter. There's a couple different kinds of diverters that first flush diverters that divert the first amount of the water that would go into the rain barrel away, so that it cleans off the roof before directing the water into the rain barrel. We'll talk about that when we get to our water class. Does the basic idea make sense, Teresa? And yeah, okay. So we'll talk about, and I'll even give you blueprints for first draft diverters or first flush diverters. Yeah, Pamela? You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. That has its virtues. But the very we have about 1,000 square foot roof that lots of birds land on, that there's cedar, there's leaf debris. And that is the very most nutrient rich. The first flush of that would be the most nutrient rich, and we just bring it on. We just include. We don't throw it out. We don't divert it.
Yeah, we had discussions about it. I want to just kind of, I know I keep making horrible drawings. Our rain barrel was designed with a first flush diverter, but we've never really installed it, or we don't most seasons. And what we have instead is the overflow and the main port. So here's the overflow, and the overflow is basically ported so it goes into a trench that's another rubble trench basically, and then that empties out into a swale, and this is the garden bed, and again this is filled with it's a mulch basin. So any particulate matter, microplastics and things like that, hopefully end up stuck here. But essentially, that isn't really entirely lost to the system. It all does end up in the soil. But hopefully it gets broken down here in this little compost system, which waters the rest of the garden and soaks in water from the rain barrel. So our thought on it was very similar, Pamela, that to let soil biology do some of that work, and make sure big particulate matter was taken out of it, atmospheric mercury and stuff like that. But otherwise, yeah, it goes here. I never directly water plants or vegetables or anything with water from the barrel. I don't feel comfortable with that. Some of this is just about our personal level of comfort. We're not comfortable with that, so we don't do it. We let the rain barrels go into these very passive watering systems. All of our beds basically are set up this way. And because of that, we don't have to do almost anything in the way of watering. It's very rare for us to have to water much in our garden because of this kind of setup.
Yeah, well, we have a screen that catches leaves, and out mice and things like that. And another thing that rain barrels can do is provide kind of a privacy fence that our neighbors are kind of close. We like to have some place that we can hang out where the neighbors can't see us, and that's the rain barrels serve that purpose. And another thing too, they're the IBC totes with the metal frames, and I'm planning on figuring out vines to grow up the metal frames, and then they would be watered by any of the it's usually kind of wet, winds up being kind of wet around the base of them.
Yeah. Just to throw in one last interaction, then we're going to do one more of these elements. We'll pick one. But to give you one more interaction that we didn't think of is thermal mass. Your rain barrels, our rain barrel is right next to our fig. It's really great to plant those sensitive plants next to the rain barrel. Always think when you have those, it's an opportunity wherever you have a rain barrel for that extra thermal mass too. Let's see, I'm going to look at my list one more time. We're going to continue on with our content for the night and get to permaculture's most powerful tool. That's a pretty, where did I put those? Fencing native plants. I'm looking for my original list of elements. So I can find a good one here. Does somebody have one that they want to do? Swales, chickens, rain garden. Oh, let's do rain garden, because rain garden is such a great thing. It's something we don't often think of a lot in permaculture circles. So let's take a minute to do rain garden. I'm going to give you a minute on this one because it's such an important element. And then we'll see who can get the most interactions for rain garden. If you say infinity, I'm going to make you do it.
Ah!
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a minute more. I still see people writing and thinking, so I'm going to give you just a second more. By the way, we will have a whole couple of classes on water. So if you have questions or things specific to the design of rain barrels, we will get to those in a later, or rain gardens, we'll get to those in a later. Okay, show of fingers here. How many, or you could use the chat. How many interactions do you have for rain garden? I see 8 from Jason. Anybody beat 8? No, okay. Well, Jason, go for it.
Alrighty. I've been thinking about this one since the county dug up the pristine, the wonderful polyculture dirt and turned it into a trench in front of my yard a couple weeks ago. The biggest connection is between the rain garden and off property in terms of the watershed, because we have a lot of crap that can get cleaned out nicely unless it runs away in a trench. So connection to the watershed is crucial. If you've got ducks, it makes a seasonal duck pond, which can be great, as long as you're not overdoing that and then polluting the watershed. Wetland plants, of course. Potential for electricity generation, especially in my climate during the dark season when solar panels and stuff aren't going to be doing it. Thermal mass, especially during the cold, wet seasons when extra thermal mass is most valuable. You can plant alongside them for wicking beds or in. Oftentimes, if you've got a dry season, that rain bed is going to stay moist a lot longer into the season than elsewhere. So when it's not a rain, it's going to be moist, kind of like a chinampa bed. You can use it for a brush pile. You get carbon material in there to help breathe fungi to clean the water up even more and get rid of your brush. Nursery and propagation space, especially in the summertime, where you can put things that would need more babying, and the down low wind in a moist microclimate. And it gives a lot of edge space. You're creating more space along the edges so you can plant really cool stuff there to stabilize the edges and do all kinds of things.
Cool. I like it. Yeah, we can, I think some has gotten a little bit noisy here. I'm going to try to figure out who and see if I can shut down the microphone there. I'm going to mute everybody, and you can make sure to unmute when you check back in. All right. So let's see. I want to talk about that one just a little bit. It's so great. Yeah, it's a good point. There's no reason why you can't grow food in and nearby a rain garden. To do a couple more, everybody knows the famous banana circle. The famous banana circle is essentially a form of rain garden. And what Bill Molson often found, and one of the reasons why he really championed the rain garden, is missionaries would come to Africa and they would put in, oh yeah, pollinators and habitat. Yeah, definitely. And they would put in faucets, so that people wouldn't have to go down to the river to gather water anymore. But the problem is they would just kind of leave their thinking there. And so what would happen is the water would go and it would find someplace in pool and it would create a mosquito problem. And so now the villagers had a mosquito problem and they had a big mud pit next to the village and it was a problem. So what Bill Molson would often do was essentially take that water, and we talked earlier about creating a mulch basin and route that nutrient or that water from here. They would fill it with brush and bulk matter and compost stuff covered over with mulch, maybe even pile it up with brush, just like Jason said. We have a big mulch basin here now that you can climb on. The water can go in here and soak in. It makes the area around it really rich. Again, from the side, it looks like a big keyhole bed, right? And it has a garden around it like this, like a rain garden. So you could do the same thing with a rain garden. And then he planted in bananas around it because the bananas need to be close together and they grow in thickets anyway. By the way, we can do this in a temperate climate with trees like pawpaws. Pawpaws like to have really close spacings in order to germinate well. They are comfortable growing in thickets together. This sort of treatment can really help them establish, especially if you have a dry site. If you have a dry site, if you're working with really sandy soil, build yourself a mulch basin like this. Fill it, pile it high, make a big compost pile covered over with mulch so you can kind of walk on it and it's usable space, and then plant around that. You can route rain barrels to it or overflow from your house. It's a really great kind of interaction. Brambles could work for it, and just kind of creating something like this. Then, like Jason said, you can attach your other garden beds to something like this, and the water is going to wick through them passively and water your food garden beds too. So just a little bit of extra interaction there. Thank you, Jason. That was excellent. Okay, well, you can feel free to do the other ones at home if you like, and continue this on with your own elements in your own garden. This is a great part of the design process, is getting people to start making these connections, see how many interactions we can get between the elements on our site. Okay, 7 o'clock, we're going to return and talk about what I think probably is permaculture's single most powerful tool. And when I say that, it's because if I were to give you the number one, first, most important way to manage weeds in your garden, this is the same, it's this. If I were to tell you the number one most important way to manage disease and pests in your garden, this is it. If I could tell you the number one way to save water in your garden, it's this. This is the thing. And if I could tell you the number one way to save time and save money if you have labor, if you're hiring labor in your garden, it's this. And it's all the same thing. It's one tool that is the number one way to save money, save water, reduce pest work, reduce weeding, and overall reduce your maintenance. So we're going to take a break while you think about what it is, and Jason can't tell because he knows. All right, yeah, building that hype on this one thing. We'll see if somebody thinks they know what it is. Let's take a break for 10. We'll come back. We'll call it right at 7:10. Come back at 7:10. It's a good idea, good thought. All right, we'll come back at 7:10 and I'll have the answer. Okay. Well, before we see myself here. Before we get on with class, excuse me. Hopefully most people are back. I'm going to read a little bit from Permaculture 2 by Bill Mollison. This is at the very beginning of Permaculture 2. On the question of how much land. This, by the way, is one of the questions that is one of the most important questions that we hear asked in the permaculture movement today. And if you become a professional permaculture designer, working with people and students to try to help them pick and choose sites and land, it's a very common thing that we end up doing. This question is one of the most important questions that we have to deal with. And it ends up being really important even for people who already own land. So admire a large estate if you like, but farm a small one. Virgil. We have made perhaps the gravest or greediest error of them all. We have overreached ourselves. On the farmlands of the northwest coast of Tasmania, they speak of a man with too much land as land poor, and he will become poorer as his holdings increase, somewhat like the greedy fisherman who catches fish until more fall overboard than he lands. If we could adjust land to our age, we might be thought of as wise, but we tend to get more land as we get older and to treat it less kindly. The whole earth demonstrates the neglect of husbandry and the greed of men for land. Companies too are discovering that large holdings are large liabilities, and these will become even more so as the petrol pool dries up. Friends recently returned from China, where 45,000 people existed in a healthy state on some 8,000 hectares, to find their son in Australia going broke on the same area. People frequently ask how much land do they need for self-sufficiency? The answer is as much as you can control. Any more and you lose self-sufficiency. Yeah, hey, I think so. It's a good answer. Let alone the ability to produce an excess. If people ask, where do I start? Then the answer is always at your doorstep. If you see a farm where the doorstep leads to weeds, then the weeds will go to the boundary. It's already out of control. Anybody, farmer or suburbanite, that has not planted a garden at the back doorstep hasn't started permaculture. If 4% of the land, that small area around a peasant, if 4% of the land, that small area around peasant houses in Russia, we talked about these in our last class, produces 60% of the food, what would happen if the peasants were given 8% of the land? It is that small plot not far from the house that is the most important area to cultivate. For the farmer, it may mean all the difference as to whether or not he can stay on the farm and survive the market and energy fluctuations. For the suburbanite, it may mean the difference between survival and comfort or misery. There's probably some ideal plot about 750 to 1,000 square meters. By the way, this is about 1/10 of an acre. For the home garden, 1/10 to 1/4 of an acre. If one is thinking in terms of annual agriculture, this means too little food, or less means too little food, more means too much land control. By the way, if you want a few more kind of perspectives on that, Peter Bain studied this issue a lot too, and in the Permaculture Handbook, he gives the number 1/3 of an acre. He says 1/3 of an acre is about enough for self-sufficiency, and that's it. Although he and Keith now live in a significantly larger acreage. If you look at Grow Biointensive, their full-time family garden plan is about 10,000 square feet. And that produces in excess for sale. So, you know, a quarter of an acre and historically, it was about the same. A family-sized plot in ancient Greece for a homestead was 1/3 of an acre. If you look at India or Nepal, you read that study we brought up last time, home gardens in Nepal. What they find is you tend to have self-sufficiency right around 1/3 of an acre, and as you grow up from there, there's most gardens tend to be 1 acre or 1/3 of an acre to 5 acres, and the break-off period is 3 acres. Once they go higher than 3 acres, profitability starts coming back down. 3-acre farms are more profitable, total, or not more profitable, have more gross revenue, but not a whole lot more profit than smaller gardens. They just require more labor. So it's a really interesting perspective about how much land. We're going to keep talking about that more for a bit, and for quite a bit, which brings me to a question. Given what we're talking about and hearing things from me, what would you say I think permaculture's most powerful tool is? Scalability? Yeah, it's very much related to this idea of scalability. Observation, social cooperation. You know what? All of these do kind of apply to what I'm talking about. Okay, thank you, Noah. So let me tell you a small story, and then we'll kind of open up for discussion about a consultation I did on a regenerative farm near me. And the guy was doing a whole lot of stuff that was really well done in terms of regenerative agriculture. But he started to take me around his tour, and I wanted to know, or on a tour, and I wanted to know what his farm day was like, because what I'm looking for are people's problems and needs, right? So I wanted to see what his farm day was like, and he started saying, well, yeah, I get up in the morning and I get on my quad and I go out to the animals. And here I'm going to draw a little, you know what I can do? I can use the whiteboard or draw another picture. I love these pictures. His farm was shaped like this. It was a big rectangle, and along the north side there was forest, and the house was right here. And this was a big, like 100-acre farm, so it was pretty huge. And that was the house. So he said, first thing I do in the morning is I get on my quad and I go out to the animals. And you know, the animals he put way out here, because that's where the previous farmer had them. So we had him in a tractor out here and was doing stuff out here. So he'd get on the quad and he'd go out here to the animals, and he'd water the animals because he'd run a hose out there to the animals. And then he'd collect his eggs while he was out there, so that was good. Then he'd come back on his quad and make his breakfast. And after breakfast, he'd get on the quad and he'd go out to the vegetable field. And the vegetable field was out here, because that's where it always was. And he had a whole bunch of, we'll put a V for vegetables. And he had a whole bunch of lines of irrigation all the way out here, tons of irrigation lines in that. Afterwards, he'd come back to the house, which was the only source of plumbing for the site. This is where the plumbing was run from the house. And so all day long, he was going this way and this way. You've seen a lot of places like that, Jenny. I have too. I see this all the time. In fact, I grew up on a farm that was almost exactly like this. It was going back and forth on the quad all day. Guess what was happening? This miles and miles of irrigation hose. By the way, what costs a lot of money? irrigation hose costs a ton of money. This is why Bill Mollison said, if you take your money and invest it in mulch instead of irrigation, you'll get twice as far and be twice as happy for it. Because irrigation hose, everybody knows, becomes a leaky and a mess and it stops working. So you have leaky irrigation hose and you have people going back and forth all day on quads. What do you have here right next to the house? You got a mud pit. You got this moat surrounding the house, filled with mud all the time. And the cars are parked here. And so this is becoming a mud pit between the cars. The inside of the house is constantly filled with mud and dust because it's being tracked all over. We talked for a while and he was talking about the kids, and here they were living on a farm where the main thing they were selling was vegetables for the market. And the kids said they never ate vegetables. Why didn't they eat vegetables? So when it was time for dinner, who wants to get on a quad, go through the mud pit and get out here to the vegetable farm to get the vegetables and come back? So here they lived on a farm and they were eating Pizza Hut every single night because nobody could go out to the vegetable garden through the mud pit to get to there. And at one point we were talking to the workers at the farm, and we were talking to them about this going back and forth. They didn't have quads. They said to me in front of the farmer who was paying their wages that they spend at least 50% of their day, 50% of their farm wages was going to people walking back and forth all day long on the farm. That's what they were paying people to do, to walk through the mud all day. This one idea of zone analysis, of taking this farm and putting the vegetable garden close to the house where they have water resources for that vegetable garden, and they don't have to have a mile of hose. They have access from the forest for mulch. They could have done so many interactions with this if they had just used some zone analysis to figure out what they were doing here. When I was there, they were having a problem with their lettuces too. I think some kind of critter was running through and just demolishing their lettuces, which was their main market crop. So when we talk about something like zone analysis, a lot of times people get the idea that this is some sort of hippie permaculture thing. A lot of times you'll hear farmers say, well, I got a big farm. What do I need an herb spiral for? What do I need to do this zone analysis thing for? But when it comes down to it, it's the number one thing that could have saved that farmer his labor cost, time. It would have meant better health for his family because it would have been eating more vegetables. It could have saved, it could have been the first line of defense on weeds, which we'll talk about in a second. It could have been the first line of defense on pests. It could have solved all of those problems, this one tool of zone analysis. So with that said, it's such an important tool and such an important concept. I'd like to give a little bit of space to see if anyone has questions, comments, observations about things they've seen like that. I know Jason has personal stories about it too, so. Yeah, Cameron.
Well, we see the similar design with our societies. I think the Gaia project sort of alludes to somewhat of a solution or a way of looking at it, where you've got the doctors and stuff living over on this side of town, but the hospital's over here. The transportation, you have to go from where you are to another place to maybe either park your car or whatever, and then the train's like another 2 kilometers down the road, so you get a taxi or something to that. It's just very separated and I don't know, disingenuous. It's very just everything's always apart from it. There's never a connection on purpose. Nothing's really done purposefully. And I can speak for over here, our sort of largest city, our motorways and stuff is actually referred to as Spaghetti Junction because it's just absolutely insane the way it's designed, and it just makes no sense. Some of the lanes have now been permanently closed down, so they're just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. And that's millions of dollars spent on it, and it's just a complete waste of time.
Yeah, Yeah, this same thing is 100% applicable to all sorts of societal problems. We could do a whole PDC applying zones, 72 hours applying zones to societal problems. Yeah. Anyone else have any? Yeah, Jason, please.
Yeah, the story that Mike mentioned, a couple of years ago, I decided I was going to do a little market garden. So all of the annual veggies that we were doing that year were a mile down the road, which is not that far. It's a 2-minute drive in the car. We didn't water it regularly enough because we had to drive in the car to water it. Harvesting days was Saturday, and it was inconvenient to get in the car to drive somewhere to pick veggies for dinner. So we wound up eating more vegetables from the store, even though we were growing a much larger area of vegetables than we ever had before, because they weren't there. It was crazy.
Yeah. So, Jason, before you go silent, or turn your mic back off, and we can kind of open this up to other people too, as a kind of experiment or design experiment, with a better grounding or thinking, and with that experience and with thinking about zones. If you were to do that again, and you had a satellite site, you have your home site, you have a satellite site. What would you do with that property a mile away? Would zones play into that?
Aha. Yes. In fact, I need to talk to that particular property owner because we're going to hopefully be doing a zone 3 garden there this year, planting corn, squash, beans, and maybe some other things, where we'll go and plant it. And then basically we'll come back at the end of the season and harvest. So the fact that it's 5 minutes away, 2 minutes away is perfect and not a big deal because we'll be going there just a few times in the whole season.
Right. So that really gives us an idea that we can plan our crops by zone 2 if we're really smart. And we talked last time about how Native Americans did that. They actually used floodplain type systems, and they would plant crops into them. And then a lot of times they might, in some cases, go someplace else where there was better living through the season. Maybe there was good foraging, maybe there were berries. They'd come back at the end of the season and do harvest in those areas. But you can't do that with everything, right? If you planted just lettuces and you didn't come back to them all season, what would you have when you came back in September? You'd have weeds and bugs, and that's all. That's it. Yeah. So, and just to give a little bit more space here before we move on, I'm going to grab my slideshow, and I have a few things about zones, and I'm going to show you a few different tools that we can use in zones that I think are really important. But while I'm grabbing my slideshow again, my presentation, if anyone has any other thoughts or ideas about zone analysis, please feel free to chip in.
I have one about a spot I did in Iowa. It was for some friends. And I'll never forget that one because it was the most money I ever put into a food forest or a design. And I was fighting with myself because no matter, I don't know, I guess I had been into permaculture for about 5 years, but even at that point, the societal pressure to put things in a kind of traditional way where there's not food right where you are. I mean, it's funny because when you ask the question, what's the most powerful tool? The first thing I thought was of the most powerful idea, which is that you simply grow food closer to the house. And they actually had a piece of land nearby, a satellite, which is what someone else was talking about here. And they're getting more food from the design at the collective, which is in town where I put everything, because they walk past it every single day. And even his wife used to laugh at it, tease him behind his back and say, oh yeah, he always says the best fertilizer is the farmer's shadow, but there's no shadow out there. And so the other thing is that once they see these plants every day, they become so attached to them that they wouldn't dare let it go to waste or let it die or whatever. So it just gets that tender, loving care. And that also is this idea you can see when you drew that picture where people were drawing lines away or drawing lines underground away from the house, it's as if it's somehow separate from us and it needs to remain over there, you know? So, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Stisham wrote, the thought that keeps occurring to me is how my zones and my neighbors might be different and what that might mean to individual design. Last time I said, and this is something that with him and I, the huge learning benefit as a permaculture designer to having a dozen people come to your house all season long while working on their projects. The issue of landscape management, what to prioritize, how to get things done, and the feeling of being overwhelmed by the landscape getting off control is easily the number one thing. And I'm not sure if she's connected or listening. I know she's on. I don't want to call on her if she isn't, but I want to open up space in case Kim wants to share some of the perspectives that we've heard about this over the season. And I would really say, for anybody doing a permaculture project, that idea that James just kind of brought up is one of the biggest issues we ever deal with as permaculture designers. I'm going to kind of shut up to see if I can't see her image. So I thought I'd shut up in case Kim wanted to add anything to this.
I'm here. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, go ahead if you wanted to add anything to that.
I guess I would just echo your sentiments that it's a benefit to us and to the students to really be able to, you know, walk the property every time and see the zones and placement in action, because it does help to shift your perspective in a way that's maybe an easier of a learning curve than it would be to go through that process and figure out that something's way too far away, or have to make that flip in your brain about proximity to your zone zero, or, you know, your home, or where your primary activities take place. But that really, it's just so fundamental to making all of the equations work, is that rehoming element or relocating element in a design to make it human scale. Like you know, we were saying, oh, a mile, it doesn't seem very far away. It's a 2-minute car ride. But the psychological impact of having to get into your car and do all the things, and, you know, God forbid you should forget a particular tool or a shovel or whatever it is. If you can't walk to it, it's probably too far, unless you have some other very specific things you're trying to accomplish, and you've got some extra support in place. But yeah, I don't think you can overstate the significance of proximity. So, yep.
All right, thank you. So yeah, just to give another little description of zones, and then we're going to talk some more about zone design and share some tools around it tonight. And keep in mind, if you're playing along, thinking from your brain as a permaculture designer, working with clients or working with people in a class, it's my meta talk again. What we're doing at this point is essentially helping students to think through zone analysis of their own site and what goes in each zone. So this is a little zone analysis. Back in the day when we were looking at buying our house, I didn't quite have access to any kind of fancy internet tools, so I used colored pencil, and this is the original zone analysis map that I did of our house. And I want to point out that that the middle of, so zone 2 you see in our front yard to the right of the screen. and that's brown. And inside that, there's an area of pink. There's like a fist of power of pink. The reason why is because on our site, you can see the area closest to the house is pink, and the areas along that inside of the property, we said were zone 1 because they had the best combination of sun. On our front yard, sun and soil analysis meant that the outsides of that were going to be zone 2. So zone 1, along the driveway of the house, has our intensive gardens. It has a lot of potted plants. It has storage space. It has some extra living space. I've got a place to put out my chair. We tended to spend a lot of time around the back porch at the table. There's a little back porch back there. And then that main area of Zone 1 garden had some important vegetable gardens. Has basically our unfurled herb spiral. We have kind of like a big herb spiral inspired garden that's not in a spiral shape. And that's all in our Zone 1. Zone 2, you'll see in our backyard and our front yard. Intensive food forests, hedgerows, perennial vegetable guilds, edible meadow systems for slash mulch. Zone 3, I want to talk about this. Zone 1 goes along the driveway because we see that every time we go up and down the driveway. Zone 3, right at the front of the property, there's a very steep slope. It's hard to access. That's kind of food forest area. And the backyard has an intensive food forest area. Beyond that, Zone 4 was pretty far back. There were already some large black cherry trees back there. So we basically are using that as a coppice lot and woodland plants and mushroom production. And then way at the back of the property on the left side of the screen is very steep slope area. There's really very little access for us. That is purely a wild area. So even on a small urban site with about an acre or 3/4 of an acre, we still have all the zones represented. We said at the beginning of the class, 10,000 square feet to 1/3 of an acre is about all you really need for self-sufficiency with intensive gardens. That's our front yard, and that little bit of Zone 2 food forest in the backyard gives about that 1/3 of an acre or more. So just wanted to point out, give you a little bit of a talk about zones here as a little bit of a case study. We said before, we can apply this to all sorts of things in our life. I'll show you in a second how we use zone analysis for our home herbalism class too. And we can use the idea to transform the societal food system too, as we said, by thinking that we can grow most of our hard to grow food close to the city. You know what? Before we continue on with this, I want to talk about crop systems per zone, because so far we've given you the big picture idea, but something a lot of people never talk about is how does this translate into actually lining up what crops do we grow in what zone? And so for our program over the last decade, we've really focused on developing that. So I want to share that with you too. Just a second. While I do that, please let me know if you have any questions or comments while I go and find my document here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Well, Mike, I really want to thank you for bringing up this topic because it's one of my kind of like my soapboxes. And I've been to clients who have 10 acres, clients who have 70 acres, and clients who have 1 acre. And I always tell them the same thing. Do everything, like try to fit everything on 1/10 of an acre and then let nature have however much of the rest. So it's really great to see Virgil, ancient wisdom. Thank you for bringing that up. And as far as easy to grow crops, I think a lot of people are concerned about calorie crops and how much space they take up. That to me is a challenge. Like I can envision, I don't have that green of a thumb, but I can envision growing enough greens and fruits on my little 1/10 acre for me and my housemates and what have you. But as far as like enough potatoes or enough beans, that seems like a whole different ballgame. Looking forward to hearing some more.
And this is something that I would love to invite Jason and Kim, who are more familiar. We've kind of really had a lot of conversations about topics like this for exactly the kind of reason you just brought up. Excuse me, making sure I can see the document. So this is one of the documents in the folder. So feel free to take screenshots of this or whatever. And this is the version made by Jason that has the cool little Transformative Adventures logo on it. Thank you, Jason. I use your version tonight. And by the way, people are like Transformative Adventures who are going to be doing this. Part of the thing with the developing this program as a cooperative means that we can make locally selected versions of these documents like Jason did here and custom tailor them. So what I'm really hoping to help you do if you're in that Transformative Adventures program and want to replicate that is you can really take our kind of curriculum and super tailor it to your own area. Because I think we've zeroed in on some of the most important things that people need locally to be able to develop good quality content for their local area. So just to give you some ideas of crops by zone, I'm hoping this will answer or address some of your question, Jenny. So for zone 1, we're focusing on crops that require regular care, observation, or watering, or that we use regularly. These are salad greens, lettuces, leafy greens like basil, and herbs like basil, cabbage family plants, including broccoli and kale, modern apple varieties. People tend to think that apples are easy, but in a lot of locations in North America, apples are actually really kind of difficult to grow unless you're spraying the bejesus out of them. So if we keep them in zone 1, we can keep them small, we can bag the fruit individually, we can have great apples for our home and our family that look like grocery store apples almost. They won't be quite perfect. They might have fly spot and stuff like that, but they won't have bugs or anything like that, just a little bit of discoloration. But we can only do that if we're really putting them close to the house in zone 1 and giving them that extra care. Same with plums and cherries. Peppers and other high value veggies that are hard to grow in more extensive zones. Zone 2, we're focusing on crops that require observation a few times a week, or weekly water maybe, or weekly care. Most conventional fruits and berries would fall into this. Most conventional vegetables and herbs, radishes, beets, perennial vegetables, chickens and other small animals requiring protection and daily care and company. Zone 3 requires observation once a week to possibly a few times a week, depending on the season. No or infrequent watering. Here's where we start to get, ideally, more calorie crop systems. Jenny, if you look at how most global societies really grow a lot of their calories, it's in systems like Jason just said. They're zone 3 systems, they're more extensive. A lot of times people will do them together cooperatively.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. People will do these more intensive gardens at home. Zone 3, a lot of them I think of as being shared, right?
That makes sense.
So in a lot of the world, corn has really caught fire. Corn came from the Americas, but all over the world it spread to indigenous peoples because they recognized the value immediately of a crop that was the absolute easiest to process. You can keep corn on whole ears in a big bucket someplace or out in the shed and bring it in and grind it for flour to use. And that's the best way to do it. You don't have to sift it. Nixtamalization is pretty easy to do with a little bit of ash. Corn is so easy to grow, so easy to process, and so super productive. We all owe an incredible debt to Native Americans for cultivating this one of the most miraculous crops on the planet. But looking for things like that we can grow in systems where we can kind of plant them and walk away from it becomes a huge thing. And then maybe being able to cooperate with a few other people on it becomes huge. So that maybe it requires a visit once a week or something, but I don't have to be the person who visits it. If I'm also cooperating with Joey and Tala, we can grow that together. So dry farm, zone 3 dry farmed vegetables like tomatoes and peppers can be dry farmed. If you're not familiar with that, you can look it up. You can spread things out to about an additional third, do lots of heavy mulch. Don't water them. They're going to look grumpy, but they're going to taste like the best tomatoes and peppers you've ever had. Mediterranean aromatic herbs. These can be grown in dry sites with no irrigation and very little in the way of care. Nursery stock. Asparagus in wild systems all over North America. Asparagus grows wild along the roadsides. We can create very wild kinds of systems that also grow asparagus. For Eric, if he's still listening, I know we cover a whole lot. I don't expect you all to be constantly tuned in at every second. And he's trying to do large landscape areas in ways that are sustainable. Man, I would be hitting lots of asparagus on there because it's beautiful. It's a beautiful ornamental plant and something that adds an additional yield. And it doesn't take a whole lot of additional labor to go through in spring, harvest asparagus for the market or teach people how to do that. And it's going to grow with very little care on its own. Turkish rocket would be another one that can grow in very wild systems like that. Three Sisters gardens we talked about last time. Large animal foraging systems, commercial food forests with extensive crops like apples, pears, pawpaws, Asian pear. We're going to talk about this in a second. This depends on your climate. And we'll talk about it in tropics too in a second. I want to give you the overview, the main idea before we try to localize it a little bit. I know I'm covering a whole lot of stuff really quickly here on this one sheet of paper. Zone 4 requires monthly observation, seasonal or annual care. Rare watering, mostly just during establishment. These are native hardy tree crop systems. In the eastern woodland area, this might be in the north, serviceberry and pawpaws require just almost nothing. There are some really great edible hawthorns that I think there's a good market for. Crab apples could be grown this way. As you move further south, we probably get into persimmons being a major thing. So bananas, as you go further south, tend to be pretty easy in that way. So just to give you kind of an overview there. We'll talk more in a few minutes about this idea of picking tree crops per zone. And yes, what else do I have there? An extensive native pioneer trees grown from seed sources like alder, cottonwood, maple, black hawthorn, Pacific crabapple. So Jason added that specific idea. That's great. Possibly along with native blackberries, blue elder, Oregon grape. So I really wanted to kind of read through that. One, this does give you some specifics to work with, which I wanted to do. But I also wanted to give you an overview of the way we're thinking here about how we can organize crops really truly by zone, so that we're really putting things out in more broader areas that we really have to have very little interaction with. But getting back to Eric's property, just because I know he's dealing with large property areas and wants to use them in a way that's constructive and good for the earth and provides yields to him and removes the maintenance cost. I'm really thinking those zone 3, zone 4 crops again. Those perennial vegetables, those cut flowers that he's already doing, edible meadow systems. We're going to talk a lot more about these in the next couple of classes, okay? We're just kind of going over a lot of information here, I know. But if I had a large area to kind of, or large pieces of land to manage, I'd be thinking semi-native, very much zone 4 systems, beautiful crab apples, hawthorn. I would be planting lots of chestnuts. I'd be planting lots of pawpaws. You know, you can just grow, pawpaws are so easy here in our region. And hopefully allowing those things to get established as we go. Tying back some of our other things from earlier in class, those mulch basins we created earlier. If I were planting pawpaws, I might make big mulch basins, big kind of compost piles, plant my pawpaws around those in an extensive area so that I don't have to come back and water hardly area ever, and I can get those established without watering. So I know I'm just kind of going on and on and on with these kinds of ideas around this. So I want to stop for a second and give some space to that. See if you have questions, comments, thoughts about that idea of applying zones by crop by zones. Please feel free to ask or comment.
I have a question, actually taking it away though from the landscape. And so I've gone through the exercise of mapping out my investments in zones, for example, and I've created, you know, a graphic around that. So, and I should know the answer to this question, but I haven't looked that deeply into it. When the zones are applied to social permaculture, does it remain the same, basically, that it's zone 1 are the things in our life that require regular care? Zone 2 then would be requires observation a few times a week. Is it just that simple of a transference of the zones into social permaculture, or how does that look?
It might be. I think it requires us to, my opinion, I think it requires us to think a little bit more about the topic at hand. But I like what you just said. I would start there and see if that is what applies. Yeah. So I would start with that idea and then see if it helps solve the problem. You know, one that's a common example is the kitchen. And so that, you know, a lot of us end up with everything being a junk drawer. As the kitchen constantly wants to move towards chaos, right? We want to keep the kitchen in order, but it constantly wants to move towards chaos. And what I found is that we might think it makes more sense to have like things organized by type. But then you might find that if you're using something every day, you have to get down on your knees to grab something out of a low cupboard because you put it there. If you can take all of your things that you use in the kitchen on almost a daily basis and put them in a nice little bin or something out on the counter, then you never have to open a drawer every day, right? Every day is just boom, it's right there, it can go. If you're really smart, you might keep a sponge or something. People who use knives a lot will have to actually keep a little like swab next to their knives right there. So for a lot of things, they don't even have to necessarily wash the knife. You can just go boom. Okay, Jenny, I'm glad you could join us. I hope to see you next time. And put the knife back. So a lot of our tools like that are best to maybe not go in a drawer. Maybe mise en place, absolutely. And another, everything has its place. And things that we might use a few times a week, maybe those go into a drawer, so they're out of sight, but you want to keep them in a drawer where they're easily accessible. And then things that you only get a couple of months, well, we can put those up in a top drawer or something like that. So that kind of applies there, Laura. But I think we have to ask ourselves in some ways, does that work, or do we need to think about it a different way? What do you think about that topic of finance? Did you find that that basic same framework solved the problem or worked well for you?
I haven't dabbled in it enough. Experimenting with my investments is really the place I've spent the most time thinking about it, but I want to do more. I can see it making sense. I mean, even when you first started talking about zones, and I just thought about our financial system, you know, other people were making comments about so much of how our society, the way it's structured, you know, if we applied zone analysis to it, it'd be very beneficial.
Yeah, here's one that we did with Hannah Hawthorne, who is in the group, and she'll probably join us sometimes. She's one of our former PDC students that we've created some nice content with. And we put together a permaculture approach to home herbalism course, at which, hey, you can use, get access to through Transformative Adventures, which is the whole point of this thing and creating a co-op is that we can all co-collaborate on creating things like this and promote them together, and we can create some great content. So we put together, we wanted to think about, we did zone analysis for how we think about home. And I just want to point this out because we used a little bit of a different system. We thought of it in terms of like impact in a way. So we said zone 1 was home health stuff. And we wanted to focus on not getting people to do, try to do things that they shouldn't be doing on a DIY scale. We thought true home healthcare is stuff that our doctors want us to be doing, right? Like eat more daily greens, eat greens daily, do preventative care. Herbal teas are great for that. Some home herb preparations, drink more water. You know, if you want to help your health, there's very little you can do that's better than just drinking more water every day. So take responsibility for that within your own home as zone 1. Home massage, keeping a healthy diet, having daily exercise and good habits. So we put this as zone 1. Zone 2 would be home treatments. These are things that we might be getting from people who are in our local market, who are professionals, creating herbal consumer products, right? So now we're thinking of this, Laura, as in how can we help our local economy too? So we're trying to prioritize. Zone 1, zone 2 is like local, and products that go out a way that are more corporate or less local, we put out in zone 5 because we want to use them less often. We want to use things that are close to us and in our own community, better yet, our own neighborhood. Things that are further away, we made zone 5. So that might be applicable to our investments, right? Ideally, we want to invest as close to our own community as possible and not zone 5 investments. I'm assuming that you kind of did similar came up with a similar concept. And so zone 4, we made distant large sources of products like strictly medicinals and stuff like that. And zone 5 was stuff that we leave to nature for our healthcare, which means the things that we simply have to accept. There used to be an old saying in America, no spring chicken. You know, what do you have? You have no spring chicken disease. You're no longer young. We all get old. There are some things that we have to accept. So yeah, that joke, doctor, it hurts when I do this. Well, don't do that. So this gave us a whole concept. This is how we applied zones to home health. Just give you another example. So it's a little bit different than the daily thing, but it's related, I think. So I thought it was a good example. Yeah. And Tal, it looks like you had an example in chat. When we renovated our last house, we did numerous dry runs for typical activities. Oh, it's so smart. getting home after work and school, coming from the grocery store, save so much time in design later by actually doing this activities on a daily basis. That's a fantastic design exercise right there. I love it.
I was thinking you could actually say you're working with a landscape if you've got time like I do. I mean, I'm living in my home and it's a, you know, I've got plenty of time to make changes. I could do the same thing. You know, I could do the thought process of going to the garden or whatever those things are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for contributing that. Anyone else have, oh, and hi, Ashley. So glad to see you. And on a day when we're talking about, I think it's one, it's one of my favorite topics in permaculture, this idea of how much land and using zones to solve it, and zones in general. So I'd love to hear any thoughts from you about how the zones concept changed your perspective too. Yeah, Cameron.
So this sort of comes from Holgrim's principles with the value edges and the marginal. So there's always going to be that transitional space between zone 1, zone 2, zone 2, zone 3. Have you got any advice with how to handle those particular edges and those margins and best practice, or just any advice around those kinds of things?
What I would like to do is say, what a fantastic idea you just had, Cameron. Let's take that as, remember, as we do permaculture design, we have these methods, we have these tools, we do this process, and we also try to constantly check in on the principles, the Holmgren principles and the Molson principles. And I love that Cameron just connected one set of energy principles to another principle, use and value the margins. Let's think about that. Are the margins between zones especially productive areas? Does anyone have thoughts about that? Yeah, Dennis?
I'm glad he mentioned that, because mine might be a little bit different, but I was thinking something along the lines of the zone 1 being kind of a cheating zone or a cheater zone. And maybe it's more relevant here in Florida, but there are certain things that are grown in South Florida, for example, zone 10 and zone 11, that I can't really grow in North Central Florida in zone 9. We get in the low 20s on occasion, and some of the perennial tropical and subtropical greens that I'd love to grow, I can't grow those. I put them right up against the house, especially on the south side. I've got the big, I got a cement block house, so I get a lot of heat from the house. I can grow a lot.
Totally do that too,
there.
Dennis.
But greens are automatically, yeah, I thought you might. But greens are in zone 1 anyways. People might be saying, well, it's a green, it should be in zone 1 anyway. That's true. I also am growing a couple of tropical trees in zone 1. Now I got to keep them small, of course. I don't want 35-foot trees right next to the house. But I use zone 1 as a cheater zone. So I don't know, Cameron, that might not be exactly what you're talking about, but it definitely, I have stretched the concept of zone 1 in kind of an overlap edge manner, I suppose.
Yeah. I can think of one way. I like that. Thank you so much for saying that. I have another kind of idea. Oh, you can raise your hand. EJ, yeah, go ahead, EJ. You can speak, you can raise your hand or use the hand raise icon. I just switched to the whiteboard, so you'll have to speak up, but please go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was just raising my hand and I didn't know if it was if it was able to be seen or how it works. So I just yeah, great stuff. I guess I just want to throw a question, which is, how do you think about zones when, if it's like 4 or 5 different places in an urban setting that are trying to be, trying to combine them, so they're different households, but the idea of people growing different crops for different mushrooms in the shade side of the street, etc. I've seen the zones broken down like for a small place, and I get that, but I just can't figure out how to lay it over top of what I just described, which is more than one place close by, but are independent locations.
Oh, that's awesome, and I think that's relevant to several people on this thing tonight. So we're going to do a couple of design exercises, EJ, and we're going to do one on your question after we take a break, okay? Because I think that's so great that I want to open it up and make that a kind of little design exercise for us all. I thought of an interesting way of thinking about one of the interactions that we often get between zones. This could be any generic property that I just drew. Hopefully we can all see it. But I'm going to set it up as an idea for Lily House. This is the way Lily House is, where we have, let's see if I can put it on here, forest at the top. And that's zone 5, right? A neat thing about this on our site, and Eric, I will get to you in a second too. Cool, thanks for using that hand raise. Just give you an idea here. On our site, the forest ends up contributing water and fertility down into, this is kind of a zone 4. Here, Eric, I'm going to lower your hand. I'll get to you in a second. Into food forest, and it's a little bit older, and it's a little bit smaller. You know, it's smaller plants. We have a lot of passive nursery going on in there. But what we get is it's downhill, and this is a very common pattern all over the world, is having fertility forest at the top of a hill. So what I'm seeing here is that in a way, this zone 5 is providing some material and some fertility for our zone 4 area. And even if it's on flatland, forest has this beautiful effect where the leaves fall and the soil microbiology is really rich underneath it, and the leaves fall here. And this whole area next to a forest is going to be really, really rich and very fertile naturally. A lot of times this will naturally fertilize itself. So the forest in both of these examples, the interaction, the margin between zone 5 and zone 4 is that zone 5 provides, it's like a nursery, or it's like a library or a bank. It's a bank. Zone 5 is a natural bank for fertility, for wildlife, for biodiversity, for seed bank, that it drives succession for the rest of the property. So the interaction there is that zone 5, in some very real ways, will feed zone 4. And the same thing happens on down the line, because for us, after that, we have zone 3 systems that, like Dennis said at the beginning of class, he could go into the forest to grab materials to feed his zone 3 area. Absolutely, we do that. We take plants from zone 4 and put them into our nursery where we raise them up. And we take leaves and things, sometimes fertility created in zone 4, again, trickles downhill to zone 3. So in a very real way, we can make more extensive zones resources for our more intensive zones. In fact, if you look at John Jevons in his newest editions of Grow More Vegetables, How to Grow More Vegetables, which is kind of the bio-intensive Bible, he recommends that we can create fertility systems like hedgerows, which we always put in zone 2 to feed our zone 1 intensive vegetable gardens. So a great interaction in the margins between our zones is that the more extensive zones nurture and feed our more intensive zones. And to draw one more connection, one more element for you, another thing that some permaculture sites are doing is having the same kind of thing set up, and they call it the mother garden. You can read about this in the Occidental Arts Ecology Center cookbook. They have this system. So you have the mother garden, I'm sorry, I did that backwards. That should be the grandmother garden. The grandmother garden, the mother garden, and the daughter garden. And this works a few different ways. The grandmother garden is the forest, the wild area, zone 5, zone 4, and that feeds in some very real ways. It's the fertility and everything for the mother garden, and the mother garden is the main production garden for the site. It's where they're growing their calorie crops, their things like that, and they're specifically setting it up so they have this fertility system of the forest to provide the fertility naturally for the mother garden. And the mother garden does some of the same for the smaller daughter garden, and the daughter garden is actually a children's garden. So they use the daughter garden in zone 1 as a teaching garden for the kids. I love this system too. So that's another great interaction. I'm so glad that you asked that question, Cameron. This was the answer that I made up off the top of my head. I'm going to take a picture of it and see if anyone has comments or thoughts about that.
That's really
cool. And Ashley, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was also thinking about Cameron's comment about value the margins and the margins between the zones. And was thinking about that example. Oh, here's my kids. I'm gonna move away from that. I was thinking about that example in Gaia's garden where there was protecting the zone 1 and 2 gardens with like a zone 3 hedge where the outside of the hedge is something that the deer really, really like. So you're trying to protect it from deer, and also something that's not very penetrable. And then the inside of that hedge is something you like. And so now you've taken that margin area that's between zone 2 or 3 or whatever you're separating, and turning it into an extra valued resource. So now you're using that margin between the zones for its own purpose. And then to connect it back to medicine, you were talking about different kinds of medicine in different zones conceptually. I think about that as like the communication between those zones. So there's a lot of value for me as an acupuncturist when I'm communicating with a Western provider, or I'm communicating with the person who is providing the healthcare for in their home, you know, like that communication piece. And in a way, a hedge is sort of communicating the edge. So anyway, those are just some.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Jason?
I really like the grandmother, mother, daughter garden. And that model blends really well with another way to look at the edge spaces between the zones, is that those can kind of be flex spaces. So if life gets crazy all of a sudden, my zone 1 shrinks and zone 2 might be part of what was zone 1 space because I'm only visiting it once a week instead of every day. All the way down, like some of that mother garden can mature into being grandmother garden for a time. And some of that daughter garden might mature into being mother garden. That's been a big one for me, is those spaces being able to shift up and down the zone spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, well. Well, I always say that I'm a very greedy teacher, and I learn more from these classes than my students do. I just got a lot out of that discussion. So I hope you all did too. And before we go, we're going to take another break. Before we do, I know Eric had his hand raised. So,
oh, so I was just going to say, you know, we use our spaces too, not only for growing a lot of flowers and vegetables that we sell, but it's also a space for residents to use. And so, like at some of our edges, we have like a 20-foot shipping container that we cut the whole front out of, and it's like a gazebo kind of thing, sort of.
yeah.
And other places where we have their grills and so there's a lot of interaction space there. And you know, the first couple of years we did it, it was, oh, let's just plant this here. I really didn't think. So this is helping to think through more about, like, we're gonna do a whole medicinal garden section this year. And so, like, where's the best place to locate that, you know, within the space and those kind of things.
That's fantastic. I love it. I hope the end result of applying permaculture in the way you are is going to be something that is working better for you and maybe really creating village at the site. And it's really exciting to see. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and a lot of our spaces too are shared by neighbors in the neighborhood. So frequently, you know, there might be a couple ladies come walking in with their dog. You know, they pick their vegetables for the day in their bags and they leave, but they might sit down there and have a cup of coffee or, you know, whatever, use their laptop. Or so it's kind of an interesting interaction that's sort of organically growing.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited to see when we really get into the social permaculture and community organizing stuff, we really start to hit in March, how we all get to really play with those sorts of things. Well, we're going to take a break. I'm going to take a break for 7 minutes, so we'll come back at 8:24. And we're a little bit, well, let's make it 8:25. We'll come back at 8:25. 8:25 in my time, Eastern time. So basically about 8 minutes. And we will continue on. Cool. All right. See you in a few. Oh, oops, I'm late. That's a little bit left the class, so I want to make sure I get everything in here. Yeah, coming back, we're going to finish up our a little bit of discussion on zones and try to do a quick little bit of design exercise together. So thinking again about zone 1 and why that zone 1 can have the biggest effect on our health and our family's health too. So hearing from doctors and herbal professionals, herbalism professionals, maybe one of the biggest things we can do for our health and the health of our families is to eat more daily greens. And so having a small bed in zone 1 of greens and maybe an herb spiral that we've talked about, a lot of times those two things can go together. Might be one small thing that you can do that will increase the number of greens you're eating like exponentially. So having a very simple kind, and I've just dropped, this is a page I put together. It's mostly from plantsforfuture.org. I added a little bit to it. I cherry picked a few, but the plants and the information is taken mostly from plantsforfuture.org. Excuse me. On alternative salad plants that are all perennials. These are all great perennial lettuce plants that could go. Usually these are all typical as perennials, maybe zone 2, some of them in zone 1. But I just like to point this out at this time too. These are all very health enhancing kinds of plants that we can do through a lot of the continental US. So they're pretty neat plants. So I dropped that into the chat. You can check that out. Everybody on here is familiar with plantsforfuture.org, I hope. If you're not, it's the best database for searching for plants for your project that you will ever find. It's amazing. You can search for plants by your zone, by type. They have medicinal ratings and edibility ratings. If you want a little strategy to grow a high value garden anywhere in the world, a great first step is that's a great book too. If you want a great first step on creating a garden, you could know your zone and your climate for your site. Go to Plants for Future, search for the plants, and do a search for all of the 5-star and 4-star edibility plants, and make a garden out of those plants. You will have an awesome garden that is filled with really great to eat plants for your climate. That's just like, if you wanted to cheat and say, I don't need to know any of this permaculture stuff, I just wanted to hack together a garden. If you did that and just cobbled together a garden of those plants, it would be a great garden. So I wanted to share this page with you. I have 1 or 2 more quick things. For people playing along who might want to do versions of our class, we're not going to have time in our winter PDC here to go over these, but I'm going to point out that this is a thing that we do in our class. This is also in that Transformative Adventures folder. Featured plants. So every month that we meet in the summer, we have featured plants. So I do this class on zones every June with my local crew, with my local group. And it has list of some plants that we'll taste in the garden because they're ready. And it always has perennial vegetables for the season. And summer wild green. So it has a list of foraging plants and we identify them in the garden. So every single class, whether it's herbalism, whether it's the permaculture group, whether it's the landscape transformation program, we always forage. We forage in like everything because foraging is really one of our biggest skills that we can build that will really change our lives and our way of gardening. So I want to point that out. Let's see what else I got. I got one or two more things. I got a recipe. So for every class, there is also a set of recipes. And the way those usually work, I have a set of things that I think are really, really easy for home gardeners to do. So every recipe is really versatile, can be used with a bunch of different vegetables and things. So for June, I do, let's see, I can't remember. This will be a surprise to me. What do I do in June? And when it's not COVID times, we taste these. So we'll have these in class and everyone will get to taste this. So the one that I do for June is citrus and fennel, because I do perennial fennel bulb. So that's always ready in June. So in Michigan in June, I have fennel bulbs, which to a lot of people who know fennel and don't realize can be perennialized is kind of trippy. So in June, we do the citrus, fennel, and Mizuna quinoa salad with chives. So this is a really great recipe. This is like one of my favorite recipes. Or with, in this case, I use Allium unifolium as the chive that's pictured right there. That beautiful pink chive is Allium unifolium. It's a lovely recipe. I really highly recommend giving it a try. And then it always has variations on the recipe too. So instead of giving people, it's like pattern language for easy meals. So this one I'm going to drop in the chat. So please try my recipes, and they're pretty darn good. I hope you like them, and tell me if you like them. So, but stuff like this is great because it's one of the big barriers to getting people doing permaculture well. Like James was saying at the beginning of class, maybe people aren't familiar with this stuff. They need a relationship with it. We build this relationship in our classes every month as we go. So people really get the idea of how to use these things. As you become permaculture activists, what I could say is one of the most important things you could do is stuff like this. Don't just show people the vegetables, really get them to interact with them and to use them and to build a culinary technology, a cuisine that allows them to use these vegetables more often in their day-to-day life, which means it's got to be easy, it's got to be versatile. So yeah, I just kind of pointed that out. Okay, I think that's a lot. I have one more thing about zones I want to talk about in a second. I want to just give a little bit of dead space here and see if people have more comments, questions about our main topic for the day, zones. And since Ashley joined, I know that zones have been a major part of, now that you have food in your mouth, of your thinking. I would love to hear again this case study, opportunity for a case study of how zones have been applied.
Yeah, so I have 25 acres and had considered doing a quite large farm, and actually zone thinking changed my mind about what we were going to even produce, because I recognize this concept of lower intensity, or extensive work and intensive work, and realized that I can dedicate so much space to zones 3, 4, and 5, and that I can rearrange my whole thing around a forage concept and getting my product that I'm going to actually market from foraging as opposed to intensive work. And it just feels a lot more natural and a lot easier to start getting in and planting into the forest that I already have and building a forest. So that's how it's changed it for me.
Cool, yeah, thank you. Anyone else have things to add about this topic before we do a quick design exercise?
I'll say something interesting about zones. I live in an urban area, and my zone 1 of health, that super intensive health zone, has many times intersected with my urban zone 5, which is empty, fallow lots that between mowings, they get overgrown with delicious, highly medicinal, highly nutritious plants. And so my forage area, zone 5, I do nothing to maintain it. It's like the urban wilds, and then intersects with my zone 1 for my health.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Let's try, I'm gonna try something here. If I can make it work.
Pam has something to add, by the way, too. Pamela.
Oh, Pamela, please do. Please go for it.
Oh, okay. Well, this is an, I hope I haven't talked about this. I talk about this a lot. If I talked about it here, just stop me. This goes back to the idea of eating more greens. And I have a very dear friend who's a MD in Germany, and his mother was alive in Germany during World War II, and she survived eating nettles. And people were foraging because there just wasn't food. And the rates of chronic disease went way down. And the traditional herbalists really noticed this, and they zeroed in on it. And this man's name is Dr. John Switzer, SWITZER. Well worth doing a search. And he really pounced on this idea, and it turns out that plants have biophotons in them that they create in photosynthesis. And he believes that that is the most important nutrient in our diet. They're antioxidants, very powerful antioxidants. And within 24 hours, half the biophotons are gone. They've just disappeared. And in 3 days, they're all gone.
Yeah.
And so there's great value in these, zone 1 greens. I mean, and he's a very, very successful doctor. He's also doing Ayurvedic. He's near Munich. He's, and in Germany, they let him do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And which is why he's in Germany. And so that's really cool. And I'd be happy to post an article that he wrote, sort of a short article in our class material, so that people can delve more deeply into this. And if you, the simplest recipe is a smoothie.
Yeah.
Get really good at that.
Yeah, please do. That would be great. I would like that. Yeah, I think I'm convinced of it too. I'm convinced that nothing has affected my health more than having a zone 1 greens garden and herb garden. And eating greens every day. It's huge. So before we go tonight,
and then
take
also
time to do and yeah, I think, and Pamela,
I just want to add one thing. That one summer, I sort of inadvertently wound up, willingly, happily, I healed my soul by only eating things out of the garden at the, our farm at the end of the road. And so I just didn't care. I was thinking, where are you going to get your protein? Well, I don't care. I'm not going into town. I'm not going to, I'll live on cucumbers all summer. And the thing of it is that I had a phenomenal and completely unexpected reversal of a nasty chronic health condition. And it was the biophotons.
Well, there's a whole lot of research showing that I've heard many doctors say it now, that the number one thing you can do to enhance your health is eat greens every day. So there's definitely something to it.
Well, it's the
Before we
freshness.
go, I
It's
do want to
the-
take time.
Wait, it's the freshness. And if people, I mean, you can just do sprouts. It's the biophotons, the freshness.
That's
I
very cool.
believe it's true. Anyway.
I will look into it more. And yeah, please do post something about it. I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
Certainly that speaks to our concept of zones too, because if you have your stuff going in zone 1, it's very fresh. Before we go, I do talk and do a bit of a design exercise on zones. And so taking a look at this is, I've posted this before. This I took from Mother Earth News. Looking at this, does this use zones? Are there interactions that you think are missing, or things we could do with this? If this were your farm, if you got this and you moved here mid-season or at the end of the season, what would you do to change this in terms of its zones? Or do you like it? Curvy lines, all those straight lines. You know, they're very inefficient in terms of space, the straight lines. Yeah, it's not integrated either. All of these things have a lot of space. I visit a lot of farms.
Like a quarter.
Yeah, please.
Is that like a half acre?
This is supposedly
Quarter
for
acre?
Site. I think it's supposedly for an acre site. Yeah, what do you think about having cows, 2 cows, 2 pigs, bunch of chickens on an acre site? It's a lot for an acre. I think they're not going to grow the food. It looks like they're supplementing it. They have a bit of a grain crop there. You know, maybe 1/10 of an acre of some kind of a grain isn't going to go a whole long way. It might be half the feed for one of the cows. Yeah, integrate the vegetables together.
So very sectional.
Looks symptomatic of not interaction. It's kind of not very interactive there. It's not a product of interaction.
Yeah, not a lot of interaction going on. Oh yeah, hauling compost all over the place, right? They definitely need some compost interactions. I see compost bins, but they're definitely hauling the compost all over the place. Where's the fertility coming from? Where's the pest management coming from? Remember, in our permaculture systems, we're trying to solve pest and disease problems through biodiversity too. Well, let's see if I have more. I think some of the others on here are permaculture designs. Hopefully, this shows some good zone design. This is one by Bill Mollison. Some of these by Bill Mollison. How about this one? What would you do with this design if you came to give a consultation? Run.
It just needs more stuff. There's not enough beneficial relationships. There's not enough relationships, period. So of course there's not going to be enough beneficial relationships.
Yeah, tighten it up. Yeah, you know what? The biggest thing that I see is not only is the main vegetable garden way out in the upper left corner, way out in the back, It's behind the tool shed. It's behind the golf court. It's behind the greenhouse. It's got a little fenced in area. You got to go through an obstacle course to get to your vegetables. Whoever's going to get their vegetables, if you got to go through an obstacle course, it's like American Ninja Warrior. Every time you got to get a carrot. Yeah, definitely a waste to spend. Where do you sit? Where's the comfort? I mean, it looks like they do have a little pond area up front, but yeah, then there's no relationship to that, to where their food is. Let's see what else I have. Yeah, happy spaces. Now, a lot of these are permaculture ones. Here's another one. What do you think about this one? For one, I don't see a house here, so this looks like it might be like a satellite site again. Yeah, the one with the tethered goat needs nitrogen. Yeah, got a lot of crops to fertilize there. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that and just say that all of these, unless anybody else has comments about this one, I want to get to one last example that I really want to do together. It's the one that James suggested. Anybody have a last comment about this one? I'm going to find it. Maybe it's a community garden. You know, I don't see like parking. Maybe there's parking for it. I don't know. It could be. My thought again is, if I were going to do a community garden on this scale with people, or community farm, I would be focused on zone 3 and zone 4 crops. Next week, we're going to start talking about trees and tree systems and global tree systems. What we find is that most societies, there are traditional societies around the world, did zone naturally. And like we said at the beginning of class or earlier, they naturally organize things by zone. So they would put, you know, their daily greens close to the houses, have little cottage gardens right up close to the house, some favorite plants. You know, humans love plants. They have plants where they live. And they love to eat the plants where they live. Oh, it's a natural thing. And then we work together and we have extensive systems like agroforest systems. You know, you could read about the Kyrgyz apple walnut forests and how they manage that. It's one big apple walnut forest that grows wild, and it's filled, the main species are apples and walnuts. They're semi-cultivated. They graze pigs through them, so it's also a pannage system. And they manage it semi-communally. You know, people will get kind of like community agreement to harvest certain areas of it and take it to the market, but they manage it all collectively. It's a very smart system to do collectively, because nobody has to go and be there and be committed to work it on a weekly basis or a daily basis. You go when you have time, you go when you need the money, you go, it's largely managing itself. The humans are doing a little bit to improve it, but it's on autopilot. If people don't show up and it fails, it's not, the apple walnut forest is still going to be there. Community garden type systems and community farm type systems, if people don't show up, or there's social problems, or people get busy, or people don't fulfill their contracts, the whole thing kind of devolves into a weedy mess a lot of times, because the zones weren't right? So if we had thought about the nobody waters a forest, right, it's going to go anyway. So one of my biggest things that I would like to see us do better as permaculturists make community gardens is think that if it's community and it's not where somebody's living, then it should naturally be zone 3, zone 4, right? I did a consultation now for 2 different college permaculture gardens. And I want to tell you, you all can be, let's pretend I'm creating the garden. And I would like you all to be my permaculture design consultant. When I went to talk to them, we were talking to the teachers and the professors, and they said, well, we want to grow a bunch of things that the students are familiar with and will like to eat. So it's a college garden at a university. We're going to grow lettuces, we want to have tomatoes, we want to have peppers, a lot of peppers. We're going to do, market garden stuff for traditional corn, want to have some corn. Thinking about putting in beans, things like this. And how can we make this more permaculture? This is the way that we're thinking. What do you think about that crop selection for a university campus? No way. And the thing is, why? Too many transient people. They live there. Think about when they live there, they're exactly, Noah, they're going to be gone. They picked and made a list of crops, all crops that were going to be most labor intensive when they were gone, and most harvested when they were all on break. So then they have to have a team of volunteers to come and take care of the garden for them, because the whole garden needed the most maintenance and had the most yields during the time when the college students weren't even there. So I tried to direct them towards, why don't we grow something like those Kyrgyz apple walnut forests that will maintain themselves through the summer, not need that, because they needed to be thinking in zones. Even though there were college students living there, it wasn't the same as a zone 1 garden for those college students. It was more like a zone 3 kind of thing, because they were transient. Now, this is really the way we need to be thinking. EJ, you got a question, comment?
Yeah, this has come up for me, and also at like library or other social institutions. This is what you describe is exact. I mean, they want to do traditional gardening stuff. What I was thinking was approaching, for example, the library or the school, and seeing about somehow, because the one thing they do have is security, which is a kind of an advantage, and so somehow integrating it so that the maintenance is, I see it as an opportunity for them to get more funds and expand their program, because then they end up having someone there instead of hiring outside landscaping, etc. And then they integrate it into whatever programs they would have there. So a library is a great example, or a school. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, is there any precedent for this? Has this happened? I mean, is that the right idea?
Yeah, and this is a great segue to our next class topic. Next week, we're going to start talking about trees and their energy interactions and tree systems. And we're going to be talking about historic global agroforest systems. And the truth is that community gardens are kind of made up in primarily the United States in the last few decades, is where kind of the idea mostly came from. There is some historic precedent for it, but the historic precedents for it are really entirely different. And traditional peoples around the world have never had anything like that. Traditional peoples around the world have done communal forms of gardening, like we talked about last time, the Toft and Croft system, where they did small scale gardening at home in their little area in ways that were appropriate, zone appropriate, using crops appropriate to that zone. And then the areas that were broader acre, that were further away, that were communally managed, they used more extensive systems. Maybe that was some kind of system using 3 sisters like we talked about, or it was an agroforest kind of system like those apple walnut forests in Kyrgyzstan. So there are systems like that around the world. That's the precedent for us. So my opinion, and you don't have to take my word for it, I can be wrong, but my opinion is that we will do best as designers as we emulate proven systems from indigenous societies and horticultural societies around the world. And some of those existed in indigenous Europe before it was colonized and turned into, basically an aristocratic system. And some of them persisted even through to today. Some of these systems still exist today. We will do best as we try to emulate those systems. And so I'm really bullish on the idea of community agroforest systems, community coppice lots, things like that. So that would be the precedent, EJ, in my opinion. I've been talking a lot. I'm going to show just one last thing. And we pretty much, EJ, this is your other question. We pretty much already covered it. I'm going to throw it up here anyway. Last kind of question, last thing for the night. If this plays, we'll see. Is this playing? Can you see it? Oh, no. Yes? It's a subdivision? Oh, okay, it's playing for, no, it's not playing, okay. Well, it's just a cheesy graphic of a subdivision that's not gonna play. The question that EJ asked, can we apply zones to someone who's living in, say, a subdivision, a small subdivision? Maybe you have a little 5,000 square foot lot. What do zones look like if you have a 5,000 square foot or 10,000 square foot lot? Does someone want to talk about that or describe that, how they think? Just give it a talk tonight.
I have a 4,500 square foot lot.
Perfect.
And the zones, it's very interesting what you say about the communal zone 4 and the communal zone 5. I feel like if there were other people thinking like me in the neighborhood, then the empty lot where much yummy, free, edible stuff is growing would be our communal zone 4 and 5.
Yeah. Me thinking, when I have been in that situation, I'm thinking my zone 1 is whatever the sunniest part of my area I can get in, with maybe some pots, maybe some small gardens, an herb spiral. Maybe my zone 2 is a nearby little hedgerow. I can guerrilla garden with some Jerusalem artichokes or maybe an Asian pear, something like that. Maybe zone 3 is some kind of a communal, zone 4 is some kind of a communal. Wherever I can go, guerrilla garden.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's right. Macro zones, micro zones, we just got to be creative. We've got 2 minutes if anybody has any final thoughts to send us off. I hope you see why I love this one topic of zone analysis so much that I spend almost a whole class with people talking about zone, sector analysis, and relative location. I think these are very powerful tools. And they're some of our most powerful tools for thinking about how we change society too. So there we have it. Anybody have last thoughts?
Sure, I'll jump in. So actually, I was asking about if it was 5 different locations in a city, like for example, a few blocks from each other. But what I'm grasping, since you started talking about this topic, I mean, you mentioned community, coppice lot community, just the idea that instead of a community garden, which there's one near one of my locations, it's right in the neighborhood, and there's nobody ever there. I mean, it just seems like they don't use it. And if they do, it just seems like it would be imagine if it was a community coppice lot, the amount of use it would get would be exponentially larger. So one of the locations is a church and it has more space. So it makes sense to make that, a zone 4/5, and then, melt it into, for example, there's a special needs community living in the church, and try to do like, salad, cut flowers, herbs, whatever. So yeah, and then the other yards, I'm just trying to figure a way to make it so that they get what they want, but that's not this isolated incident where they're on an island away from these other locations. I'm trying to figure out, because it's one thing to connect them to their own yard and then perhaps other people who walk by in a loose way, but how do I make it so that they actually, I don't know, they intersect, the one you would actually walk to the other one, and I'm not sure how to ask the question. Anyway, I don't want to keep going. There's other people who should talk. So thanks.
And actually at this point, yeah, fantastic. Those are all good tools. And on that note, it's 9:01, and we've been at it for 3 hours, and it looks like not everybody is asleep, so that's good. It's been interesting. So good. And I know you weren't. And I will stay and hang out a little bit more. What I'll say about, yeah, good night, Eric. And what I'll say about that last question is we're going to talk more about patterns for intensive garden in zone 1 and zone 2 and all that as we move on in the class and we get things like polyculture in our polyculture class. So we are going to cover those patterns too. And I think I'll hopefully give you some tools, EJ, they'll help you solve that problem for those people where they're living and maybe help them a little bit too. And I see Noah's hand up. I'm going to say good night to everybody. Take off if you feel like it. I'm going to hang out and chat just a little bit more if anybody wants to. I just want to say good night. Thank you so much for joining me. And we will see you next Monday. We're going to start talking about trees and their energy interactions and tree systems. So good night, but I will hang out and ask.
Good night. Thanks so much, everybody.
Good night, everyone. And Noah, saw your hand.
Is there a homework assignment?
For any of these workshop nights on Wednesday that we start to do exercises like this, it would be a great time to, and probably on Monday when we come back, I will start by asking anyone if they have, if they, we're working on zone analysis and relative location, and that the exercises we did today in elements and all that, it would be a great time to take whatever your problem is for this class and apply these tools to your problem. Does that answer the question, Noah?
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, Cameron.
So this is actually a question, well, for you, Mike, but anyone else who's sort of been doing permaculture and has examples. But first, my project is for community gardens, so this last bit's been awesome. So that's great. But with the zoning stuff, so my question is leading back to what I sort of asked before as well, with these intersectional zones between them. Do you find that the yield you get out of them, like, are they more productive spaces? Because with my stuff I've been learning about community and that kind of stuff where it would apply is things that don't exist or can't exist without that connection. So you can have a community and a neighborhood and all that kind of stuff, but that on itself, all you have is individuals. The individuals might belong to a family or something like that. But then when you start getting things like friendship and companionship and working together, your yield is tenfold. So because of that connection and that intersection of spaces, things that didn't exist before, they now do. And so because of all that, your yield is higher. What you're getting out of it is more. But do you find that, like, is that correct on just the sort of gardening sense as well, where they intersect? Are they more productive spaces?
Those areas in between zones, so moving from zone 5 to zone 4, yes, hypothetically, because in most climates, zone 5 will eventually be forest. In zone 4, we're thinking is agroforest. Forest will always net produce some fertility, right? It's what forest does. If we're smart, we can capture that net productivity and route it to our zone 4. So that intersection between that real forest and our agroforest is probably going to be very productive. As we move from zone 4 agroforest to zone 3, our zone 4 forest, our designed forest might not be as productive and fertile as a natural forest, but still going to be pretty good. And yeah, I think it's going to be more productive and have more edge. It's going to have more biodiversity. The edge between a zone 3 garden and a zone 4 food forest is going to have more biodiversity, more productivity, more fertility. So yeah, I think it will always be more productive in that way. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, you know, this idea, I very much look forward to hearing about how your thinking develops about a community garden, because I've been trying to solve that problem for decades and have tried different things. And the closer I get to the Kyrgyz apple walnut forest, I think the better it is. And I was thinking about, what do people really need from the community garden? Probably in your case, yes. There are people in our societies today, in industrial societies, who are lacking in food. But in a lot of cases, what maybe some of the highest value food they could have are things like berries and fruits for their kids, things they'll eat, and that are high nutrition, these greens that we've been talking about. And these can grow in those kinds of systems. And the other thing that they really need is that community center we were talking about, that place where community intersects. Well, you know what? You make a row crop garden or a community garden, and you do rows in there and you're planting corn. There's no space for community in the community garden anymore. You plant a forest garden that's a beautiful place that has this, that's encircled by trees, that has fruit that you can walk through and pick, and it has a village center to it. Now you have created a community garden. So, and it is a garden that feeds the people, instead of it being a garden that requires labor from people to maintain the garden. A lot of community gardens are designed in a way that they're actually net energy suckers. They require more inputs and more energy to maintain than the food they will ever produce. And we think, those of us who are privileged in society then look at that and say, why don't these poor people just go garden? You know, I gave them a community garden they can use. It's because the energy dynamics don't actually make sense for people who are impoverished and don't have that privilege. If we can design something like those apple walnut forests that are maintaining themselves and productive without the added labor cost, and they can just go and enjoy it and participate in it, that takes care of them instead of requiring them to take care of it. It's like, give people freedom, don't give people more work to do. That's not people care.
Yeah. But from my interviews, because I've gone around interviewing permaculture teachers and community garden leaders, I'll just say the one last thing. One of the best things that got pointed out was, just with this case, 50% of what you're doing is community. And with all the pre-design stuff and everything we've been learning through PDC, how important that is. It's a fundamental thing that people leave out of, well, their designs, especially, you know, councils and governments saying, oh, we should have a food forest or whatever. Cool, but they leave out the 50%, which is the community.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, with the pre-design stuff and everything like that, yeah, good thing to put in there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. I love that you're working on that problem.
Thanks.
That's right, give people freedom, not more work to do. All right, yeah, thank you, Noah. Thank you, everybody. I think I'm going to check out for the night too. And if you are a local crew, remember we have class this Sunday too, and we'll be back for this one on Monday. Good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.